The crystal chandeliers sparkled above the marble floors of the riverside concert hall, casting dancing lights across the walls. Tonight was special. The annual charity gala brought together the city's wealthiest music lovers, famous performers, and anyone who considered themselves important in the classical music world. Everyone wore their finest clothes, sipped expensive champagne, and talked about upcoming concerts and famous musicians they personally knew. Daniel Crawford stood near the grand staircase, straightening his silk tie for the third time. As the newly appointed director of the concert hall, this was his first major event, and he wanted everything to be perfect. He'd spent months planning every detail, from the flower arrangements to the catering menu. This evening would prove to the board of directors that hiring him was the right choice. "The ice sculptures look magnificent," said one of the board members, approaching with a glass of wine. "You've outdone yourself, Daniel." He smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Only the best for our patrons. Tonight's performances will be equally spectacular. We have graduates from Juilliard, the Royal Academy, and the Paris Conservatory." As the crowd mingled in the lobby before the main event, Daniel noticed the caretaker moving quietly along the edges of the room. Her name was Rosa Martinez, and she'd worked at the concert hall for 15 years. He'd seen her around, always pushing her cleaning cart, always wearing the same plain gray uniform, always staying invisible among the glamorous crowds. Rosa was checking that all the programs were properly arranged on the side tables. She moved with quiet efficiency, making sure everything was in order before the guests filled the main hall. Daniel had barely spoken to her beyond a brief hello. To him, she was just part of the building's background, like the fire extinguishers or the emergency exit signs. Lisa Chen, the event coordinator, was rushing past when Rosa gently touched her arm. "Excuse me, Miss Chen. I wanted to ask about next month's open audition night." Lisa stopped, checking her tablet. "Yes, what about it?" "I'd like to sign up to perform," Rosa said softly, her accent carrying hints of her native Philippines. There was something in her voice, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place for someone in her position. Lisa blinked in surprise. "Oh, well, certainly. Anyone can sign up. What instrument do you play?" "Piano," Rosa replied, her eyes brightening. "I'd like to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Daniel had been close enough to overhear this exchange, and he couldn't help but let out a short laugh. He tried to cover it with a cough, but several people nearby had heard him. They turned to look at Rosa, and Daniel saw his assistant suppress a grin. "Did the caretaker just say she wants to play Rachmaninoff?" whispered one of the wealthy patrons, a woman dripping in diamonds. "How amusing." Daniel leaned toward his assistant and said, "Just loud enough for others to hear." Next thing you know, the parking attendant will claim he's a conductor, and the janitor will say he composed a symphony. Several people chuckled at his remark. Rosa's cheeks colored slightly, but she kept her composure. She simply nodded at Lisa. "I understand there's a sign-up sheet in the office. I'll fill it out tomorrow." "Of course," Lisa said, her voice professional but her expression uncertain. "The audition night is open to everyone in the community." As Rosa turned to leave, wheeling her cart toward the service elevator, Daniel shook his head with amusement. "I admire the confidence," he said to the group around him. "But there's a reason people spend years at expensive conservatories. You can't just decide one day you're going to play one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written." "Absolutely right," agreed Mr. Thompson, one of the hall's major donors. "My daughter studied piano for 12 years at the finest schools, and even she wouldn't attempt that particular concerto. It requires not just technical skill, but years of professional training." "Exactly," Daniel continued, warming to his subject. "People don't understand the difference between playing a few notes and being a true musician. It takes privilege, access, the right teachers, the right opportunities. It's not something you pick up while mopping floors." The group laughed again, and Daniel felt pleased with himself. He was fitting in perfectly with these influential people. This was his world now, far from his own modest upbringing that he preferred not to discuss. He'd worked hard to get here, to earn his position, and he wasn't about to let anyone think that just anyone could do what he did. As the evening progressed, Daniel forgot about the brief encounter. The performances were excellent, the donations. Generous, and several board members congratulated him on a successful event. By the time the last guest departed near midnight, he felt satisfied that he'd proven himself worthy of his prestigious position. What Daniel didn't see was Rosa, still in the building long after everyone else had gone home. She'd finished her cleaning duties hours ago, but she never left immediately. Instead, she took the service elevator down to the basement level, where old furniture and unused equipment were stored. In the corner of the largest storage room sat an old upright piano, forgotten and out of tune. Rosa had discovered it years ago and spent her own money to have it tuned twice a year. She sat down on the worn bench, her tired body finding familiar comfort in this ritual. She placed her hands on the yellowed keys and closed her eyes. Then she began to play. The music that flowed from that old piano transformed the dusty basement into a concert hall. Her fingers moved with practiced grace, playing Chopin's nocturnes with heartbreaking beauty. She moved through pieces by Mozart, Beethoven, and yes, Rachmaninoff. The same Rachmaninoff that Daniel had mocked her for mentioning. James, the night security guard, had paused in his rounds to listen. He did this every night that Rosa played. He'd been working at the concert hall for 8 years, and he'd heard countless professional performances in the main auditorium. But nothing moved him quite like Rosa's playing in that basement. "Beautiful, as always, Miss Rosa," he said softly when she finished. She smiled, her face looking younger when she talked about music. "Thank you, James. The acoustics are terrible down here, but at least I can play without bothering anyone." "You could play for thousands," he said, not for the first time. "Why do you hide this gift?" Rosa's smile faded slightly. "It's complicated, but maybe not for much longer. I signed up for the audition night." James grinned widely. "Good. It's about time people heard what I hear every night. You're going to shock them all." "Maybe," Rosa said quietly. "Or maybe they'll laugh like Mr. Crawford did tonight. But I've been silent for too long. It's time to play for someone other than you in these old walls." She stood up, her knees aching from the long day of work. Tomorrow she would clean again, push her cart through the beautiful halls, and remain invisible to the people who walked past her. But in 1 month, everything would change. As Rosa rode the bus home to her small apartment, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the sacrifices she'd made, the dreams she'd set aside, and the music that had never left her heart despite everything. Daniel Crawford and his wealthy friends had no idea who she really was. They judged her by her uniform and her occupation, never imagining what lived inside her. That was about to change. In 1 month, she would sit at that grand piano on the main stage and show them what true talent looked like. Not talent born from privilege or expensive lessons, but talent that survived despite poverty, despite sacrifice, despite being overlooked and underestimated for 20 years. Rosa smiled to herself as she stepped off the bus. Let them laugh now. Soon, they would listen. Rosa's small apartment was nothing like the grand concert hall where she worked. The building was old, the paint was peeling, and the radiator made strange noises at night. But it was clean, and the rent was cheap enough that she could send money home every month. Well, she used to send money home. Not anymore. She made herself a simple dinner of rice and vegetables, then sat at her tiny kitchen table with a cup of tea. On the wall across from her hung a framed photograph, faded with age. In it, a much younger Rosa stood on a concert stage holding a trophy and beaming with joy. She was 19 years old in that picture, wearing an elegant dress, her hair styled perfectly. The girl in that photograph looked like she belonged to a different lifetime, because in many ways she did. Rosa had grown up in Manila, the daughter of a seamstress and a taxi driver. They didn't have much money, but her mother had saved for years to buy an old piano from a neighbor who was moving away. Rosa was 7 when that piano arrived in their small home, and it was like a door to another world had opened. She taught herself to play at first, picking out melodies she heard on the radio. Her parents noticed something special in the way she played, how she seemed to understand music in a way that couldn't be taught. When she was 10, her mother used money meant for new shoes to pay for proper piano lessons. Her teacher, Professor Garcia, recognized her talent immediately. "This child is extraordinary," he told her parents. "She has something rare, something that appears maybe once in a generation. She needs serious training." But serious training cost serious money, money her family didn't have. Professor Garcia believed in Rosa so much that he taught her for free, giving her lessons 3 times a week after his other students had gone home. He entered her in competitions, using his own money for the entry fees. Rosa won her first competition at age 12, then another at 13. By the time she was 15, she'd won every youth piano competition in Manila. The newspapers called her a prodigy. Music schools started paying attention. When she turned 18, something incredible happened. The Manila Conservatory of Music offered her a full scholarship. Not just for tuition, but for everything, books, materials, even a small living stipend. She would study with the best teachers in the country, practice on world-class instruments, and train for an international career. Her parents cried with joy when she received the letter. Their daughter, the girl from the poor neighborhood, was going to become a concert pianist. Professor Garcia told her she had the talent to play in the greatest halls of Europe and America someday. For 2 years, Rosa lived her dream. She practiced 8 hours a day, performed in recitals, and grew as a musician. Her teacher said she played with unusual depth and emotion. "You don't just play the notes," one professor told her. "You make the piano speak from the soul." Then, just before her 21st birthday, everything changed. Her mother started feeling tired all the time. At first, they thought it was just from working too hard at the sewing factory. But the tiredness got worse. Her mother lost weight, couldn't climb stairs without stopping to rest, and sometimes felt confused about simple things. The doctors ran tests. Rosa remembered sitting in that hospital waiting room with her father, both of them silent, both of them knowing something was terribly wrong. When the doctor came out with the results, his face told them everything before he spoke a word. Cancer, advanced stage. Her mother needed treatment immediately, and it would be expensive. Very expensive. The Philippine health system could provide basic care, but the kind of treatment her mother needed, the kind that might actually save her life, cost more than Rosa's family could ever afford. The doctors recommended specialists, new medications, treatments that might give her mother a fighting chance. Rosa looked at her scholarship, at her dream of becoming a concert pianist, and at her mother's tired face. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "I can work in America," she told her parents. "Filipinos can find jobs there. I can send money home for treatment." Her father refused at first. "You can't give up your music. Your mother would never want that." But her mother was too sick to argue, and Rosa had already made up her mind. Professor Garcia begged her to reconsider. "Rosa, you're so close to graduating. Just 2 more years. Can't we find another way?" There was no other way. Rosa knew that wealthy families could handle medical emergencies, but families like hers couldn't. One serious illness could destroy everything they'd built. Her mother had sacrificed for years to give Rosa piano lessons. Now it was Rosa's turn to sacrifice. She withdrew from the conservatory and applied for a work visa to America. Her piano skills wouldn't help her there, she knew. America didn't need concert pianists from the Philippines. It needed workers, caretakers, people willing to do the jobs others didn't want. 3 months later, Rosa stepped off a plane in a cold American city, carrying 1 suitcase and a heart full of determination. She was 21 years old, and her career as a musician was over before it had really begun. The first few years were the hardest. She worked as a hotel housekeeper, then as a nursing home aide, sending almost every penny back to Manila. Her English improved slowly. She made a few friends among other Filipino workers, people who understood what it meant to leave everything behind for family. Her mother's treatment continued for 3 years. Sometimes she got better, sometimes worse. Rosa called every week, listening to her mother's weak voice, pretending to be happy when inside she felt hollow. She hadn't touched a piano in all that time. It hurt too much. Then one day her father called with different news. The treatments had stopped working. The doctor said there was nothing more they could do. Her mother had maybe 3 months left. Rosa tried to get time off to fly home, but she'd just started her new job at the concert hall and hadn't earned vacation days yet. Her supervisor was sympathetic but firm. "If you leave now, I can't guarantee your job will be here when you return." She couldn't risk losing the job. The medical bills were still piling up, and her father needed help. So Rosa stayed in America while her mother died half a world away. She wasn't there to hold her hand. She wasn't there to say goodbye. That was 18 years ago now, but the guilt still felt fresh sometimes. After her mother died, Rosa could have gone back to music. She could have tried to rebuild what she'd lost. But too many years had passed. She was too old to start over at a conservatory, too unknown to get performance opportunities, too broke to pay for the connections that might lead to a career. So she kept cleaning. She paid off her mother's remaining medical debts, sent money to help her father until he passed away 5 years later, and learned to live with the ghost of what might have been. But she never stopped playing. At first, she could only find time once a month to visit a church with an old piano. Then she discovered the forgotten piano in the concert hall basement. The security guards let her stay after hours, and slowly, quietly, she kept her gift alive. Rosa set down her teacup and looked at that old photograph again. The girl in the picture had dreams and hope and a future full of music. That girl was gone, but maybe, just maybe, some part of her could come back. In 4 weeks, Rosa would walk onto that stage and play. Not for fame or career or money. Those chances had passed. She would play because the music inside her refused to stay silent anymore. She would play to honor her mother's sacrifice, to prove that talent didn't disappear just because life got hard, and to show people like Daniel Crawford that they didn't know everything. She would play to remind herself that she was more than just a woman who cleaned floors. Rosa finished her tea and went to bed, dreaming of pianos and stages and the feel of music flowing through her fingers like coming home. The 4 weeks passed both too quickly and too slowly. Rosa continued her daily routine at the concert hall, cleaning the same floors, polishing the same brass railings, emptying the same trash cans. But now there was something different. A quiet anticipation hummed beneath her everyday tasks, like a secret she carried in her chest. Every night after her shift ended, she went down to the basement and practiced. Her fingers moved across the old piano keys, running through the Rachmaninoff piece over and over. Some nights her playing was flawless. Other nights her hands felt stiff and clumsy, and she worried that she'd forgotten too much, been away from serious music for too long. James, the security guard, became her only audience during those practice sessions. He'd pull up an old folding chair and sit quietly while she played. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and just listen. When she finished, he'd always say the same thing. "You're going to blow their minds," but Rosa wasn't so sure. Doubt crept in during quiet moments. What if Daniel had been right to laugh? What if she really was just a foolish woman who'd let her pride convince her she could do something she had no business attempting? What if she embarrassed herself in front of everyone? 1 week before the audition night, Rosa was cleaning the main concert hall when she overheard Daniel talking to a group of donors. They were planning next season's programming, discussing which famous performers to invite. "And what about this community audition night?" one of the donors asked. "Do we really need to continue that program? It seems a bit beneath the standards we're trying to maintain here." Rosa slowed her cleaning, staying close enough to hear Daniel's response. "I've been thinking the same thing," Daniel said. "We inherited the program from the previous director, but honestly, it's more trouble than it's worth. The performances are usually mediocre at best. It doesn't really fit with the prestige we're building here. So cancel it," another donor suggested. "I would. But the Community Outreach Committee insists it's good for our image, makes us seem accessible to regular people." Daniel's tone made it clear what he thought of regular people. "I just show up for 15 minutes, make an appearance, and leave. This month might be entertaining, though. Our caretaker signed up to play Rachmaninoff." The group laughed, and Rosa felt heat rise to her cheeks. She kept her head down, continuing to dust the seats as if she hadn't heard anything. "The cleaning lady?" one of the donors asked, still chuckling. "Oh, that's rich. Will she be performing in her uniform?" "Let's hope not," Daniel replied. "Though I suppose we should appreciate the confidence, however misplaced it might be. At least it'll give us something to talk about at dinner parties. Remember that time the janitor thought she could play like a concert pianist?" More laughter. Rosa's hands tightened on her cleaning cloth, but she forced herself to keep moving to stay invisible. Let them laugh. Let them think whatever they wanted. In 1 week, they would hear the truth. That night in the basement, Rosa played with more fire than usual. Her fingers attacked the keys with passion, pouring all her frustration and determination into the music. The Rachmaninoff piece was powerful and demanding, full of thundering chords and delicate moments that required absolute control. It was a piece that could break a performer who wasn't ready for it, but Rosa was ready. She'd been ready for 20 years. "That was incredible," James said when she finished. "I mean it, Rosa. I've worked here for 9 years. I've heard some of the most famous pianists in the world perform upstairs. You're as good as any of them." Rosa smiled, but her expression was tired. "Being as good isn't enough, James. I'm a middle-aged woman in a cheap dress who mops floors for a living. They've already decided I can't play before they've heard a single note." "Then prove them wrong," James said simply. "That's what the piano's for. You can't argue with music. Either you can play or you can't, and you can." The night of the audition finally arrived. Rosa had requested the evening off from work, something she rarely did. She went home early to prepare, taking more time than usual to get ready. She'd bought a simple black dress from a thrift store. Nothing fancy, but it was clean and presentable. She did her hair carefully and put on a little makeup, something she almost never wore. Looking in the mirror, Rosa barely recognized herself. She looked like someone who might belong on a stage instead of behind a cleaning cart. But her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The audition night was never a big event. It was held in the concert hall's smaller recital room, which seated about 100 people. Usually only 30 or 40 showed up, mostly family members and friends of the performers, plus a handful of curious community members who enjoyed live music. Rosa arrived an hour early, too nervous to wait at home any longer. She checked in with the coordinator, Lisa, who seemed surprised to see her. "Rosa, you really came," Lisa said, looking uncomfortable. "Listen, you don't have to do this if you're having second thoughts. No one would think less of you." "I want to play," Rosa said quietly. "I signed up." "I'll play." Lisa nodded, though she still looked worried. "Okay, you're scheduled 5th, so probably around 8 o'clock. There's a practice room down the hall if you want to warm up." Rosa found the practice room and sat at the piano there. Her hands were still shaking. She tried running through some scales, but her fingers felt clumsy and cold. Panic started creeping in. What was she doing? Why had she thought this was a good idea? She closed her eyes and thought about her mother, about Professor Antonio, about that girl in the photograph who'd been so full of dreams. She thought about all those nights in the basement, playing for no one but herself and James. She thought about Daniel's laughter and the way he'd dismissed her so easily. The shaking in her hands began to settle. At 7:30, Rosa made her way to the recital hall. She slipped in through a side door and took a seat in the back row, not wanting to draw attention to herself. The room was about half full, maybe 50 people scattered around. She spotted Daniel near the front, checking his phone and looking bored already. The first performer was a teenage boy playing violin. He was nervous and made several mistakes, but his parents clapped enthusiastically. The second was an older woman who sang an aria from an opera, her voice wavering but sincere. The third was a college student playing guitar, actually quite good. The fourth was a man who performed a piano piece by Mozart, technically proficient but somewhat mechanical. Then Lisa walked to the microphone. "Our next performer is Rosa Martinez, who will be playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, third movement." Rosa stood up, and several people turned to look at her with surprise. She saw Daniel sit up straighter, a smirk already forming on his face. She heard whispers ripple through the small audience. "Isn't that the cleaning lady? Rachmaninoff? Is she serious? This should be interesting." Rosa walked down the aisle toward the stage, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the elegant concert gowns she'd once worn as a student. Her shoes were old but polished. She carried no sheet music because she'd memorized every note years ago. She climbed the 3 steps to the small stage and crossed to the beautiful grand piano that sat in the center. It was a much nicer instrument than the old upright in the basement. Her hands would finally get to play on keys that responded properly, that sang the way they were meant to. Rosa sat on the bench and adjusted her position. She could feel every eye in the room on her. She could practically hear their skepticism, their amusement, their expectation that she was about to make a fool of herself. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. The room fell silent. Even Daniel had put his phone away, ready to witness what he expected would be a disaster. Rosa closed her eyes for just a moment. She thought about her mother's hands worn from years of sewing. She thought about her father driving his taxi through Manila's crowded streets. She thought about Professor Antonio's tears at the airport. She thought about every floor she'd mopped, every toilet she'd cleaned, every time someone had looked through her as if she didn't exist. Then she began to play. The first notes rang out clear and strong, filling the small recital hall with sound. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys with absolute confidence, and the piano responded beautifully. The opening passage of the third movement was bold and dramatic, and she played it with the authority of someone who'd lived with this music for decades. In the audience, Daniel's smirk disappeared. His mouth actually fell open slightly. Rosa's hands flew across the keyboard, navigating the technically demanding passages with ease. But it wasn't just technical skill. The music she created was alive, breathing, full of emotion and story. Every note carried weight. Every phrase built on the one before it. People in the audience stopped fidgeting. They stopped whispering. Some leaned forward in their seats, drawn in by what they were hearing. Rosa poured everything into the performance. 20 years of sacrifice. 20 years of silent longing. 20 years of music that had lived inside her with nowhere to go. It all flowed through her fingers into that piano, transforming into sound that filled the room and seemed to fill something in the people listening too. The piece built toward its powerful conclusion, the triumphant chords rising and falling like waves. Rosa's hands moved with fierce joy now, claiming this moment, refusing to apologize for taking up space, for having the audacity to be excellent at something people thought she had no right to attempt. She played the final chord, and it rang out in the sudden silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the room erupted. The applause started slowly, almost hesitantly, as if people couldn't quite believe what they'd just heard. Then it grew louder, stronger, until everyone in the recital hall was on their feet clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. Rosa stood up from the piano bench, her own eyes wet with tears. She bowed once, twice, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. This was what she'd dreamed about for 20 years. Not the applause itself, but the feeling of sharing her music with people who truly heard it. She looked out at the audience and saw Daniel in the third row, standing like everyone else, but his expression was complicated. The smirk was completely gone. He looked stunned, maybe even a little ashamed. Their eyes met for just a second before Rosa looked away. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Finally, Lisa came back to the microphone, her voice excited. "Ladies and gentlemen, Rosa Martinez." What an incredible performance. Rosa walked off the stage on shaky legs, her whole body trembling now that it was over. Several people approached her immediately, wanting to talk, to congratulate her, to ask questions. An elderly woman grabbed her hand and said, "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. Where did you study?" Before Rosa could answer, she noticed that several people in the audience had been filming on their phones. She saw them watching the videos back, replaying moments, their faces lit up with excitement. One younger woman was already typing on her phone, probably posting the video somewhere. Rosa didn't think much about it in that moment. She was too overwhelmed, too emotional, too exhausted from the adrenaline that had carried her through the performance. She thanked people for their kind words, accepted their compliments with grace, and eventually slipped out a side door to get some air. She found James waiting in the hallway, a huge grin on his face. "I told you," he said simply. "I told you they'd be blown away." Rosa laughed, wiping at her eyes. "I can't believe I actually did it." "You did more than that," James said. "You showed them who you really are." The next morning, Rosa woke up to 17 missed calls on her phone. She stared at the screen in confusion. Who would be calling her so many times? She rarely got more than 1 or 2 calls a week, usually just telemarketers. As she was making coffee, her phone rang again. It was Lisa, the event coordinator from the concert hall, and she sounded breathless with excitement. "Rosa, have you seen it? Have you checked online?" "Seen what?" Rosa asked, confused. "The video. Someone posted your performance last night and it's going viral. It's everywhere. You have to look." Rosa's hand started shaking again, but for a different reason now. She opened her laptop and searched for her name. What she saw made her gasp. The video of her performance had been viewed over 2 million times in less than 12 hours. The comment section had thousands of messages, and they were still coming in every second. "This is the most beautiful piano playing I've ever heard. Who is this woman? She needs to be famous." I'm literally crying. This is what real talent looks like. The fact that she's been cleaning floors while having this gift is criminal. Rosa scrolled through the comments, her coffee forgotten, her mind spinning. The video had been shared on multiple platforms. Music websites were writing articles about her. Classical music forums were discussing her technique. Someone had already created a fan page. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. She answered hesitantly. "Is this Rosa Martinez?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "My name is Patricia Holmes, and I'm a reporter with the local news station. We'd love to interview you about your incredible performance last night. Would you be available this afternoon?" Rosa agreed, still in a daze. Before she could even process that conversation, another call came in. Then another. A classical music blog wanted to feature her story. A morning radio show wanted her to call in. A concert promoter wanted to discuss possible performance opportunities. By noon, Rosa's small apartment felt like it was closing in on her. Everything was happening too fast. She decided to go to work early, needing the familiar routine to ground herself. When she arrived at the concert hall, she found a group of reporters waiting outside. They rushed toward her with cameras and microphones, shouting questions. "Rosa, how long have you been playing piano? Why have you been hiding your talent? Do you have any upcoming performances scheduled?" Rosa pushed through them politely but firmly, escaping into the building. Inside, the atmosphere was strange. Other employees stared at her with new eyes. Some congratulated her. Others seemed almost resentful, as if she'd somehow betrayed them by being more than what they'd assumed she was. Daniel's office door was open, and she saw him on the phone, looking stressed. When he spotted her, he quickly ended his call and came out into the hallway. "Rosa, I need to speak with you," he said, his voice different than she'd ever heard it. He sounded almost nervous. "Could you come to my office?" Rosa followed him, feeling strange walking into his office as something other than the person who emptied his trash can. Daniel gestured for her to sit in one of the expensive leather chairs facing his desk. She dusted those chairs 100 times but never sat in one. Daniel sat down across from her and was quiet for a moment, as if trying to figure out what to say. Finally he spoke. "I owe you an apology. A serious one." He looked directly at her, and Rosa could see genuine regret in his eyes. "When you signed up to perform, I laughed. I dismissed you. I made jokes about you to other people. I judged you based on your job and never once considered that you might actually be talented. That was wrong of me. Deeply wrong." Rosa stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I've been getting calls all morning," Daniel went on. "Board members, donors, other directors in the arts community. Everyone's talking about your performance. The video has brought more attention to this concert hall than any marketing campaign we've ever run." He paused. "But that's not why I'm apologizing. I'm apologizing because I was arrogant and dismissive toward you as a person, regardless of how talented you turned out to be. You deserved basic respect, and I didn't give you that." "Thank you for saying that," Rosa said quietly. She wasn't interested in making him feel worse. The apology was enough. Daniel leaned forward. "I want to offer you something. We have a gala coming up in 6 weeks, our biggest fundraiser of the year. We book famous performers, sell tickets for hundreds of dollars. I'd like you to be one of the featured performers. We'll pay you, of course, a proper performance fee." Rosa's eyes widened. A few days ago, she was invisible in this building. Now the director was offering her a paid performance at their most important event. "I need to think about it," she said, her mind racing. "Of course, take your time," Daniel said. "And Rosa, I want you to know that whatever you decide about performing, your job here is secure. But I also hope you understand that you don't have to just be the caretaker. You can be both, or you can choose to pursue music full-time if opportunities arise. You have options now." Rosa left his office feeling like she was floating. The rest of the day passed in a blur. More interview requests came in. A small music label reached out about recording possibilities. A university invited her to give a master class to their piano students. That evening, Rosa went down to the basement like always, but this time James wasn't the only one there. 3 other employees had heard she might be playing and had come to listen. They sat quietly while she practiced, and when she finished, they applauded just like the audience had the night before. Walking home that night, Rosa thought about how much her life had changed in less than 24 hours. The video had now been viewed over 5 million times. People around the world were hearing her play, sharing her story, and learning her name. But the strangest thing was that Rosa herself hadn't really changed at all. She was the same person who'd cleaned floors yesterday. She had the same memories, the same loss, the same calluses on her hands from years of hard work. The only difference was that now people could see what had always been there. She thought about her mother, wondering what she would think of all this attention. Would she be proud? Would she feel the sacrifice had been worth it? Rosa hoped so. As she unlocked her apartment door, her phone buzzed with another message. This one was from Professor Antonio in Manila. Someone had sent him the video and he'd tracked down her number through mutual friends. Rosa, the message read, I knew you would play again someday. I knew the music in you could never truly die. Your mother would be so proud. I am proud. You've shown the world what I always knew was there. Rosa sat on her small bed and cried, but this time they were different tears than the ones she'd shed over the years. These tears were relief, joy, and a sense that maybe, just maybe, the long wait had been worth it. She'd spent 20 years invisible, but she'd never actually disappeared. She'd been there all along, just waiting for the moment when the world would finally be ready to see her. And now they had. 3 weeks after the video went viral, Rosa sat in a television studio, waiting to be interviewed on a national morning show. She wore a new dress that Lisa had helped her pick out, something professional but still simple. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she felt that familiar nervousness creeping up her spine. The host, a friendly woman with perfectly styled hair, smiled warmly as they prepared to go live. Just be yourself, she whispered. America already loves you. The cameras came on, and the host turned to face Rosa. We're here with Rosa Martinez, the concert hall caretaker whose piano performance has captured hearts around the world. Rosa, your video has now been viewed over 20 million times. How does that feel? Rosa took a breath. Honestly, it's overwhelming. I never expected any of this. I just wanted to play again after so many years. I didn't do it for attention or fame. I did it because the music inside me needed to come out. Tell us about your journey, the host said, leaning forward with genuine interest. You were a prodigy in the Philippines, correct? Rosa nodded and shared her story. She talked about her mother's illness, the impossible choice she'd faced, and the 20 years of sacrifice. She talked about playing in the basement after everyone went home, keeping her gift alive in secret. As she spoke, she could see the camera operators and crew members listening intently, some with tears in their eyes. What's the most important lesson you've learned from all of this? The host asked. Rosa thought carefully before answering. That your worth isn't determined by your job title or how much money you make. I was the same person cleaning floors as I am now playing piano on stages. The only thing that changed is that people finally saw me, but I was always there. We all are. Every person you pass on the street, every worker you don't notice, every quiet person in the background, they all have stories, gifts, dreams. We just don't always take the time to see them. The interview ended with thunderous applause from the studio audience. As Rosa left the building, she checked her phone and saw messages from people all over the world. A single mother in Brazil who said Rosa's story gave her hope. A janitor in Chicago who'd started taking guitar lessons again after 30 years. A teacher in Japan who played the video for her students to show them that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. Rosa realized that her story had become bigger than just her. It had become a mirror for everyone who'd ever felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated. The gala at the concert hall arrived faster than Rosa expected. This time she walked in through the front entrance, not the service door. She wore an elegant gown that a local designer had offered to make for her, free of charge. The designer said it was an honor just to be part of Rosa's story. Backstage, Rosa could hear the audience gathering. This was different from the small recital hall. This was the main concert venue with over 800 seats. Daniel had told her they'd sold out within hours of announcing her performance. Some tickets had been resold online for triple the price. Lisa came to check on her. How are you feeling? Terrified, Rosa admitted with a small laugh. And excited. And grateful. All of it at once. You're going to be wonderful, Lisa said, just like you were at the audition. As Rosa waited for her cue, she peeked through the curtain at the audience. The seats were filled with wealthy donors in expensive clothes, yes, but also regular people who'd saved up to buy tickets. She saw families, students, elderly couples, people from all walks of life. In the front row, she spotted James, the security guard, wearing a suit she'd never seen him in before. He was grinning from ear to ear. Then she saw something that made her breath catch. In a seat near the middle sat Professor Antonio. Her old teacher from Manila had flown all the way to America to see her perform. He was older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were as bright as she remembered. Rosa felt tears threaten to fall, but she blinked them back. There would be time for tears later. Right now she had to play. The lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. The announcer's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rosa Martinez." Rosa walked onto the stage to deafening applause. She bowed, then sat at the beautiful Steinway grand piano, the same one that concert pianists from around the world had played. Her fingers touched the keys, and she felt that familiar sense of coming home. She began with the Rachmaninoff piece that had started everything. But this time she played it differently. She played it with the confidence of someone who no longer had anything to prove. She played it with joy instead of desperation, with freedom instead of fear. The music filled the concert hall, reaching every corner, touching every heart. Rosa lost herself in the performance, forgetting about the audience, forgetting about the cameras recording for the people watching online. She was just Rosa and the piano and the music that had been her constant companion through everything. When she finished the first piece, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. But Rosa wasn't done. She played Chopin next, then Debussy, then a traditional Filipino folk song that her mother used to hum while sewing. That last piece wasn't technically difficult, but it was the most emotional. It was her way of saying thank you and goodbye to the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her. By the time Rosa played her final note, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. People were cheering, crying, calling for an encore. Rosa stood and bowed deeply. She looked at Professor Antonio, who was crying openly, his hands pressed to his heart. She looked at James, who was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. She looked at Daniel, who was applauding with genuine respect and admiration. After the concert, the reception was packed with people wanting to meet her. But Rosa made her way through the crowd to Professor Antonio first. When she reached him, they embraced without words, both crying. "You did it," he whispered in her ear. "You became everything I knew you could be." "I never stopped being it," Rosa replied. "I just had to wait for the right moment." Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, Rosa found herself alone in the concert hall. She walked onto the empty stage and sat at the piano one more time. The building was quiet now, peaceful. Daniel appeared from the wings. "I thought I might find you here," Rosa smiled. "Old habits. I'm used to having the place to myself at night." He walked closer, his hands in his pockets. "I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. About you, about myself, about how I see people. You've changed me, Rosa. You've changed this whole organization." "How so?" Rosa asked. "We're starting a scholarship program for talented musicians who can't afford traditional training. We're opening up more community programs. We're making sure that talent is recognized regardless of where it comes from or who has it." He paused. "You taught us that excellence can exist anywhere in anyone. We just have to be willing to see it." Rosa felt a warmth spread through her chest. "That's good. That's really good. And I wanted you to know," Daniel continued, "that you've inspired me to look at my own journey differently. I grew up poor too. I worked my way up, and somewhere along the way I forgot where I came from. I started judging others the way I was afraid of being judged. You reminded me that dignity doesn't come from titles or money. It comes from how we treat people and how we live our truth." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who'd learned the same lesson from different angles. Rosa eventually decided about her job. She kept her position as a caretaker, but only part-time. The rest of her days were now filled with music. She performed at concerts, gave lessons to students who couldn't afford expensive teachers, and recorded an album that would be released the following year. But she never forgot what those 20 years of cleaning floors had taught her. She never forgot that work is work and all honest labor has value. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, and she made sure to see the people others overlooked. The video of her performance continued to spread, reaching every corner of the globe. It became more than just a viral moment. It became a reminder that human potential can't be measured by circumstances. The talent doesn't announce itself with wealth or status, and that sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones we walk past every day without noticing. Rosa's story proved that it's never too late to reclaim your dreams, that sacrifice doesn't erase who you are, and that true worth exists independent of recognition. Whether the world sees you or not, whether anyone applauds or not, your gifts and your value remain. On quiet nights, Rosa still went down to the basement to play the old upright piano. Even with all the fancy stages and beautiful instruments now available to her, there was something special about that dusty room where she'd kept her music alive during the hardest years. James would still come to listen, and they'd talk like old friends, because they were. He'd seen her worth before the world did, and that meant something. Rosa's mother never got to see her daughter's triumph. Professor Antonio was getting older and wouldn't be around forever. The years of sacrifice couldn't be undone, and the pain of what was lost would always be part of her story. But Rosa had learned that life isn't about avoiding loss or sacrifice. It's about what you do with what remains. It's about keeping your light alive even in the darkest times. It's about staying true to who you are, even when no one is watching. She'd spent 20 years invisible, her talent hidden behind a cleaning cart and a gray uniform. But she'd never actually disappeared. She'd been there all along, playing in basements, keeping her gift alive, maintaining her dignity in the face of dismissal and condescension. And when her moment finally came, she was ready, because true talent doesn't need wealth or recognition to exist. It simply needs to be given the chance to shine. And Rosa Martinez proved that when you combine genuine skill with hard-won grace and quiet determination, the result is something that can change not just your own life, but inspire countless others to believe in their own hidden worth. The piano keys didn't care who was playing them. They only cared about the music. And Rosa's music, born from sacrifice and sustained by love, reminded the world that greatness has no prerequisites except passion, dedication, and the courage to keep going even when no one is watching. That lesson was worth more than any concert hall could hold.